There we go. Hopefully everyone can hear me and see me and it's all good. This is the first time that I've gone live. So welcome to the True Paranormal. If you haven't seen any of my October live streams or haven't read any blog posts or anything, the True Paranormal is just a group that I've set up so that, you can tell it's my first live stream because I can't actually get my words out properly. But the True Paranormal is a group which I have set up so that it basically ups standards, is what I want it to do. I want it to properly show what the paranormal is and how you should go about investigating it and things like that, because I think there's a lot of misinterpretation about paranormal. I think that there's too much, there's not balance with it. So this is my review of an episode that Most Haunted put out around Halloween this year. I can't remember the exact dates. I have done a written review of the episode. So if you want to hear all of my thoughts on the episode, because I'm not going to list everything here, I will forget things. So if you want to see exactly what I think of every single moment, then you can have a look at that post which I shared yesterday is when I posted it. But I'm just going to go through a few points of the episode now, just to, just give more in-depth thoughts to certain things, and because I don't want anything to be misinterpreted, because I'm aware that I was probably quite negative, or at least I feel like I was quite negative in the review that I did, or at least I was quite critical, not negative. Negative implies that I was properly, really criticising things, but there were certain things in the episode which I wasn't a fan of. I feel like I praised them a lot in the previous review, but yeah, this video will just be going into my thoughts and summarising it so you can listen to it like as a podcast type thing or anything like that. Like I say, it is my first live, so if I am kind of stumbling over my words a little bit, that is why I am a bit nervous. And I've also got a page of notes here, just bullet points to refer to, because my memory will probably not be brilliant here or there. So, and let me know as well in the comments what you thought of the episode if you did see it. Because I thought, looking at the previous one where they went to Pendle Hill, the previous one was really good because I have grown up watching Most Haunted. Like Most Haunted, what started like early 2000s. I was born in 1998, so I literally grew up with Most Haunted on the TV. My parents have always had like a bit of an interest in the paranormal, so they'd had a bit on in the background and things, and I would watch Most Haunted, and it was amazing. And because as a kid you don't criticize it, you just look at it and you're like, oh my god, look at all this stuff that's happening, and I was quite creeped out by it and things. But then as you get older, you become more critical of what you see, and you get opinions on it, and so with all the Derek Acorah stuff, and with I think it was 30 East Drive, with the incident where Carl was dragged backwards up the stairs, and there was a lot of controversy around that, I remember at the time. With those events, Most Haunted kind of dipped in my, just how I think of them. I didn't hold them to as high of a, oh yeah, they're definitely true and believable. So, I reviewed the Pendle Hill review. I reviewed the Pendle Hill video that they did, and I was amazed by it, which is why I'm continuing to stick with Most Haunted, because I don't know whether or not they're legitimate or not. I'd like to think they are. I've said in my reviews I'd like to think they are. I'd like to think that any paranormal investigation group out there saying our results are absolutely valid is legitimate, but you don't know for sure. So the previous review, absolutely amazed by them. When they did what they have dubbed as the Witch's Cottage, I was amazed. Because they were, whenever there was a noise, they were overlaying footage, which just means that footage from one camera was being played beside footage of a different camera, so you could see all the camera angles and you could see what everyone was seeing, and it was brilliant, and you could see that it very clearly overlapped, and they were showing around rooms and being like, oh look, there's no one in this room where we're hearing the banging from, there's no one over here, there's no one in these cupboards, and that was very good. But going into now the main bit of this review of the current episode. Well, not current, of the part 1, because they've done 5 parts, all of which are about an hour long. And I can see why they've done it, because it's Halloween. It's a big time for investigators. Everyone feels that they need to put out some big investigation or something like that. And it's one where I'm like, you don't have to. I mean, I know that, like, myself for Halloween, throughout October I was doing the 28-day cycle. Stopped on day 17 because it is tough to do that. But yeah, so you don't have to, but it helps in a way, and I get it from a creator point of view. But one, I think they should run a live stream, because again, with investigating, I feel like you always need to do live streams. You always need to, if you don't do a live stream, you need to very clearly show every single bit of footage that you've got, and you need to try not to cut anything, which is why for the lives I did a continuous live as well as night vision footage, which was split down into segments. But yeah, for Most Haunted, really they should do a live. But as I've said in my review, granted, they're in, as they say, they're in the shadow of Pendle Hill. They're in the middle of the countryside where it might not be possible to do a live, because they're in the middle of the countryside. That you don't have brilliant signal in the countryside, so that might be why. But then they need to say that that's why. If they go to a countryside location and don't do a live stream there as a big Halloween thing, because already I've seen on social media people being like, oh, why haven't you done a live this year? Oh, I missed the Most Haunted lives. So it's a case of it's in demand. People want it to. They can't say, oh, it's because people don't want it, because they do. And I feel like live investigations as well just feel more authentic if you watch them, because it's a lot harder to fake things live. And that's a word I'm going to be using, like just faking. Whenever I'm saying faking, it doesn't mean... I'm going to use the word faking as a general term, whether intentional or not. Because from the point of view of someone who's not created the footage, like if the mirror behind me now, if that suddenly fell down, but I know it's because of a dodgy screw or something, that isn't me intentionally faking things, but you can still say that that's faked activity because I knew it was a dodgy screw and I could have, so it's not necessarily paranormal from that point of view. But so I'm going to be using the word faking as a general term. So when watching the Most Haunted team, I don't think they are intentionally faking it. There are certain things where you can question, and you can certainly be like in the episode, I've mentioned in the written review, Carl, he is someone where I would watch, and already from watching it as a kid, I have impressions of the team. And the reason why, well, I'm going to do a live for all the reviews I do, but a big reason why I wanted to start it off with this one is because I don't want anyone to think that I am like hating on Carl or anything like that, because I do feel like I've really called him out in a way. My impression when I was a kid is that Derek was probably faking things, because especially there was, I don't know which episode it was, might have been Suter Lighthouse, I'm not sure, but there's an episode where at the start of it, and it was early on in that first season, where he says that he's not been possessed before. Basically, he's not had spirits communicate through him as what we see in the program. But then suddenly it becomes frequently a thing on Most Haunted. And you're like, it's not happened before, so why is it suddenly happen when you're on Most Haunted? And Carl is the producer. Like, he's the one he's the head guy. Even in this episode, Yvette says to him, because she's like, oh, I'm not happy with everyone splitting off on their own for safety concerns, which is brilliant, I'm fine. And then Carl says, oh, and then she's like, oh, you're going to overrule me, aren't you? Because he is higher up than her. She is the presenter of the program, but he is the director or the producer, just the higher up person who is in charge of everything So everyone goes to him. He is the head guy. Granted, if there was like a TV studio or something involved, he may no longer be the proper head guy. But as far as I'm aware, with him just being a YouTube channel right now, he is the guy at the top who they'd referred to. So, as what I've critiqued in the past with my other Most Haunted post, is he is the producer of the program. He is the one that they'll refer to. He will be the one who is concerned about the money and about the views, and because that's how you get the money, and they need money to continue. He even says that they have budgetary restrictions in this episode when talking about cameras, which is a brilliant conversation. I do want to highlight that because I think, again, I mentioned at the start in a very rambly way about balance. You have one side, which is skeptics, saying that that the paranormal does not exist, cannot exist, never will exist. And then you have the other side, which is the believers, being like, oh yeah, absolutely, 100%, always exists, always has existed. You don't tend to have that balance. So with the skeptical side, you'd look at that and be like, why have you not got any cameras? Why are there no cameras here? So immediately, when something then happens off camera, the skeptics will go, you should have had more cameras, why didn't you have more cameras? And they'll always throw that argument there. So it was brilliant that Carl mentioned it's budgetary reasons. Granted, as I've said in my review, I don't think it's all budgetary. I think that in that location, because it's so big, like Carl says about the corridor, right? And that's a big corridor, and that's one of many corridors amongst a huge building. And yeah, absolutely, that's budgetary. You can't have cameras all the way down there. You can't have cameras everywhere. But they're Most Haunted. They're, as far as I'm aware, one of the most well-known paranormal investigation groups in the UK. They're going to have a decent amount of money behind them, on TV or not, even with their YouTube channel. They have a following. They're very well known. They will have stuff behind them. So yes, they won't be able to afford to rig that location, Ribblesdale Hall. They won't be able to rig all of that, and the surrounding properties like farmhouse, which is cottage, etc. They won't be able to rig all that with cameras. That's unreasonable from skeptics to be like, oh, you need cameras. But if they were, like with their Witch's Cottage investigation, they had one locked off camera, right? They had one, which was what they captured the child audio on. I would, if I was looking at it skeptically, I'd be like, you've got one locked off camera, why don't you have more? Because that's a small thing, and you need, 4 cameras in a room? And they showed in that one, for the Witch's Cottage, from memory, a kitchen, an upstairs room. I think there were 2, maybe 3 upstairs rooms. So you're looking at maybe 6 rooms? Plus stairs? You don't have to have cameras in every single room, because budgetary reasons. If you start adding that up and go 4 cameras a room, 6 rooms, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24 cameras at least then. Probably 26 if you include one looking up the stairs and one looking down the stairs. So, benefit of the doubt, round it up to 30 cameras. That's a lot of cameras. Plus the 3, 4 that they're holding. And yeah, then you start looking at the budget and you're like, ugh. But at the same time, are they renting cameras? Because if they're renting cameras, then yeah, that's budgetary reasons. You're paying a cost every single time. And yeah, there's the risk of, we're taking the cameras everywhere, all over the country, they're going to get damaged. But you can still reuse them until they do get damaged. So it's a one-off cost. And I don't know how much they're earning per investigation, per video that they post. But you can do it on the cheap at the very least. Right? With phones and things. It's like, when I did my investigation here, I had 2 cameras set up. I tried to get a third. Could have done maybe. So I had a tablet set up, which was the live stream one. I had this tablet set up for the random word generator. So if I wasn't running a random word generator, then that is a second camera. Which, decent quality, not brilliant, but it's decent. And then I had the night vision camera as well. So, yeah, you start looking at that and you're like, oh, that's straight away just out of random bits and pieces. Plus, I've got a laptop or two which I could set up with the webcam going. And I'm just like, that's like 4 or 5 cameras, and that is relatively on the cheap. It's not cheap because it is technology at the end of the day. It is pricey. But you can get cheap little cameras for not that much. So, granted, you're not going to be able to get much footage, because if they're in an investigation for like 8 hours, then, but yeah, so I think that argument, brilliant for big locations, not so great for small locations. But anyway, I went on a massive tangent. I will do that through the review. I will go on huge tangents. So back to Carl. When watching most films as a kid, Derek, dodgy, Carl was always on the fence because he's the producer. If I was someone who was in his position and cared about money and things, which, I'm sat here in my dressing gown, I'm not fussed about money. So, if, well, at least I'm not fussed to his extent. I'm not going to fake things. But if I was in his position, where, because you've had him, to an extent, complain about budget, right? With him saying we can't have more cameras. So if I was in his position and you knew money and views were tied together, you'd want to do what it takes to get views. Because the reality, at least that I've experienced from paranormal investigating, is that you will do an investigation, you can be investigating for a long time, like hours at a time. You could even go to somewhere extremely well known to be haunted, be there for hours, nothing will happen. Or if it does happen, it'll only be you that experiences it. That's the kind of thing. So it will be like in this episode, like he sees a face in the window and it's not captured on camera. That is something where if that happens, I'd be like, fair enough. It's like in my previous review, he saw a face in the window and I was like, okay, it seems a bit dodgy because it's him that's seen it out of everyone, but then he says he hears a noise, and then you actually can hear the noise, but no one else hears it. So I'm like, okay, fair enough. But with this episode, you've got the triad of things going on with Carl, and this is where I become skeptical, because the first thing was he kept his camera on, right? So you had the snooker ball incident happen, where suddenly, like, the team, supposedly it's between takes, cameras are off, the team are looking around, like going to the next location, and they hear something fall. And then Carl's camera is the one that just so happens to be on out of everyone's. And the funny thing here, but this is again where I am like, I'm torn between skeptical, not skeptical, because you have Greg then say, oh, why would we try and fake things? We've got all the cameras are off. There's no point in faking things if the cameras are off. And then Carl holds his hands up and says, mine was still on. So I'm just like, if it was faked, which it could have been, I mentioned possibilities for how it was faked. Yvette could have been pocketing the ball to then, in a way, like what magicians do, it's not like the hand, to kind of pluck the ball out of nowhere. And then the noise could have just been an audio overlay to the video. It's been done. I was watching an episode of Blackadder the other day, and they have audio overlays, and that was a long time ago that was done, because there was an episode where there basically were 2 Rowan Atkinsons, and you hear him speak, because one of them speaking, but it's showing the other one which isn't speaking, so that is an audio overlay. And Most Haunted could do that. I don't know if they do. I don't work on the team. I've not investigated with the team for all I know. Like, if I investigate with the team, I could hear loads of knocking and things, and then I'd be like, oh my god, you know what? I take it all back. This is amazing. But it seems, it's a common thing as well. Like, wherever they go, they seem to hear knocking, and you can watch other teams and they don't hear knocking. So I'm like, is it something with the Most Haunted team? if it is something with the most haunted team, why is it something with the most haunted team? So, you know, maybe they enhance audio. Maybe it's very, very, very faint. Knock in and they enhance it, and they don't tell you they enhance it, but then they should tell you they enhance it. There's a fair few criticisms I can give, which is why I'm just like, I wanted to do a video, because I want you to know it's not from a negative place. It's just I'm all for transparency with these things. And yeah, so going back to Carl, he has his camera on, and it's very strange to me because earlier in the episode you have Stuart saying about how unusual it is, right, to leave your camera on between takes. Like, it is procedure for them to switch off their camera once they've finished doing a take. Carl doesn't. Carl keeps his camera on, and then the noise just so happens. And as I've said, you can do an investigation and nothing will happen for long periods of time. And I think that is highlighted in this episode as well to an extent, because you've got the footage, right, of them getting general shots, which is fine and all right. It makes them all come across as very unprepared, though, which I think is strange for a paranormal investigation team to then run into the paranormal and then be like, oh, hang on a minute, what's this? So you've got a couple of things established in the episode where they're not expecting for things to happen when they do, probably because nothing tends to happen for long periods of time. Obviously, this is from a mindset of it's all true from that perspective of what they experience when capturing general shots. So you've got that, and then you've got Stuart saying about it being unusual to leave your camera on between takes. And then suddenly, it just so happens that when this thing spontaneously happens, Carl has his camera on. I'm like, but that then implies, looking at it from the point of view of, oh, it was faked, why would Greg point out, oh, our cameras are off? Why? I'm assuming Carl, like, you can say Carl admits it because he's going to have to put the episode together. Everyone's probably going to see the episode and they're going to be like, hang on a minute, why have you... So it prevents any arguments down the line, right? But that to me just says that if it was faked, one, the noise will have had to have happened somehow, and two, Greg would have been unaware of any shenanigans, right? So this is why Most Haunted is fascinating to me, because I can never decide. Because it's one where it seems like every now and then something will happen where you're like, someone has done something a bit iffy, right? Someone's done something which they may have faked it intentionally, they may have faked it accidentally, they may have done something. But then you have other things like this where I'm just like, why would you point out that? And it's like whenever a door closes, like I mentioned, why would you go, oh, that was just a door? Or, oh, that was just his shoe squeaking? If you were faking things, you'd jump in on that. You'd be like, oh my god, did you hear that door slam? Oh my god, there's a squeak kind of thing. I was like, because especially with the shoe incident, like, when Glenn's shoe squeaked, I wasn't thinking, oh, that's just someone's shoe. That was very clearly a moment where you could have gone, oh my god, there was a squeak, because it was perfectly timed. And I was like, so if they're faking it, this is why I say, in their review, in the written review, if they're faking it very well. Because there are so many things, if it's faked, where it's misdirects. And like with them running down the corridor, which to be fair, it's Carl that led that, which is actually a point I didn't mention in the review. It's Carl that led that, because Carl said, right, I'm running. Is it a misdirect? Were him and Yvette in on it? If it was faked, and no one else was? And so Carl ran up to then bring up the, because it was then him who said, I'm pretty sure it was him who said, oh, and we all ran down the corridor. We didn't go straight to that room. So I'm like, there's a lot revolving around him. So you had that incident where his camera just so happened to be left on. You then have the seeing something in the window thing, which I didn't mention this point, I don't think, in the written review. But, just kicked the table. But in the video, you can see a picture of it in the review, which I've included. Oh, everything's a bit wonky now. Just going to try and straighten you up. There you go. Still a bit wonky. But he's walking down. Just hearing cars. I don't know if someone's going to walk through the door. So he's walking down his corridor with this camera like this, right? He's walking down. I am not a cameraman. I do not know the correct procedures, which is why it was brilliant about Stuart saying earlier on, apologising to the editors and saying it was very unusual to keep rolling between takes. But if I was filming, and these are big cameras that they're holding with both hands, so if I was filming and I was trying to capture what I'm seeing, I would turn my body with the camera in comparison to where I'm looking, right? He doesn't. He goes down the corridor, and he admits this as well, which is again another thing of admitting something and then being, which then leaves the viewer being like, hang on a minute, why if you were fake, why have you admitted it? You know? So he's walking out and he goes, oh, I'm just like, if I'm a cameraman, I turn with the, you stay fixed, so your camera is seeing exactly what you've seen. So granted, he may have seen something out of the corner of his eye, which is fine because he's still kind of looking forwards, but then to actually turn his head like that, and because he describes it as he stops, he turns his head, and then he turns his body. Seems a bit unusual, but like I say, previous review, he saw a face in the window, and then he says he hears a noise, and that noise can be heard on the footage. And then, I think it was just before this as well, that he goes down with saying he's been punched in the back. Glenn makes an excellent point there, saying about how he needs that to happen to him. I think Yvette did snap a little bit at him, which I get it. Her husband is lying on the floor in pain. However, the way she snaps, I'm like, it's not from the point of view of, because she says, remember you almost had some chairs thrown at you. That line isn't, now's not the right time to be skeptical, my husband's on the floor in pain. That line is, the paranormal does exist, kind of. That's what it comes across as. And I don't want to sound negative. I'm just trying to be truthful with it. But that's what it came across as. Because Glenn's made a skeptical comment. Bit backhanded way. Like, he's not directly said that Carl is faking it or anything like that. He has said, I need this to happen to me, which is a brilliant comment. But then Yvette's response of, remember you almost had a bunch of chairs thrown at you. And then Glenn goes, yeah, I know. And I'm just like, he's made a good point. And Yvette should have an open mind to the skeptical side, right? And this is what I highlight in the review. I say, if this is legitimate, if all the stuff with Carl is legitimate, which it very well could be, I am not saying it is not. I'm whenever I review something like this, I try and sit on the fence with it and kind of dip a toe in either side and say, this is what the skeptical people will say, this is what the believer side will say. And because that's where the paranormal lies, it lies in the middle. It's not one side or the other, it's a bit of both. And people forget that. And I think in this moment, Yvette kind of forgets that. Which is why in the written review, I have said that if this is all legitimate from Carl, if he is, I mean, I've not seen the future episodes. For all I know, more stuff could happen to him. Nothing could happen to him. I don't know. But if he is seeing faces in the windows for every location that they've uploaded, if he is experiencing physical pain from things, and if he is just so happening to leave his camera on, and if he is, in a way, fluking things, if he is this hub of activity going on around him, which is what's implied, right? This is a lot of stuff that happens, and like I said, and it's brilliant because Yvette does acknowledge earlier in the episode stuff tends to happen to Carl and Stuart. From my memory, it tends to be stuff being thrown at Stuart, which is fine. And you even have in this episode, he says something drops in front of him, which I think is a point that I didn't emphasize enough on in my written review, that kind of thing does happen to him. He says, oh, look, this is just falling down in front of me. That's fine, because that's tangible. You can look at that. If like a brick gets thrown at his head, you can hear the sound of the brick, and you can see the brick on the floor. With Carl, it's not tangible. There was an opportunity for it to be when Yvette and when Yvette and Greg were saying that he had a mark on his back. The camera should have shown it. If the camera had shown it, then that's tangible. We can then see, oh yes, he does have a mark on his back. Granted, he'd been holding his hand behind his back, so could have been rubbing at it to make that mark, which is then why it would disappear shortly after, right? Because by doing that, he's just making blood flow to that area, which is why the mark appears, and then he stops doing that for a little bit, and then the blood goes right through the rest of the body. So I'm just like, there's explanations. Yeah. So I think that the team need to investigate the Carl thing. They need to. I will be investigating the rest of the parts, by the way. Not investigating. I'll be reviewing the rest of the parts. Being as critical as I have been, though, it does feel a bit like an investigation into them. But I will be reviewing the other parts of the episodes. For all I know, I might be blown away. It might be like with the Witch's Cottage review I did. It might be like that, where I'm like, you know what, you've done everything right. Nothing particularly dubious has happened. I think the most dubious thing in that episode was either Carl looking in the window or the door incident, when a door fell. But even then, I could kind of be like, oh yeah, I can see that being either just a bit of a fluke, or I wasn't saying, oh yeah, people are faking it. But with this, there are certain things where I'm like, it's just the fact so much happens and you can point at Carl for it. Because if you think about it, look at Glenn or Greg, right? They are, I believe, the newest members of the team. Yvette, Carl and Stuart have been there pretty much since day one. Stuart, I think, might have joined slightly later. I'm not too sure. I think he initially started off as a cameraman, like just a camera. So I don't think he was day one, but Yvette and Carl have been there pretty much since day one. Glenn and Greg have joined later. I'm not looking at that episode and thinking, oh, Greg's faked something, or oh, Glenn's faked something. It's always Carl, Yvette, Stuart. Not so much Stuart, like I say, his stuff tends to be tangible. Whenever anything happens to him, it tends to be something falling. It's like, I know it's been said about his baldness. I can't remember the name of it, but he said that was caused by a spirit they encountered at the Ram Inn, I believe, or the ancient Ram Inn. So again, that's tangible. But with Yvette, it's the knocking that seems to occur around her. And with Carl, it's other stuff. It's usually injury, but yeah. So this is one where if I was the team, I would be investigating it. I would be looking into why is this stuff always happening to Carl. That's what I'd be doing. But yeah, like I said, I'm not decided on the team. So I'm not going to be like, oh, they're faking stuff. This is how they're faking it. This is why they're faking it. And I'm not absolutely believing it. I'm not like, oh yeah, this is amazing. This is pure paranormal activity. Because I know my own experiences. I know other experiences people have had. This is again the point of the true paranormal. It's to gather. It's a big database to gather all of these experiences, all of these encounters, and just try and put them all in one place. So you can then. It's kind of like a chart, right? A line chart. So you get your data, you mark it on graph paper, you then draw a line through it. and then you have a look at these bits of data, and you see what falls on the line and what doesn't fall on the line, and anything that doesn't fall on the line, how far out is it? Anything that is extremely far out is an anomaly, and you rule that out. You say, right, that's just a fluke result, doesn't mean anything, probably won't happen again. Anything that's close to or on the line, you're like, that is significant. This is what I'm trying to do with the True Paranormal. And that's why I'm going to keep reviewing Most Haunted, because I'm curious to see how close to the line it is in comparison to all these other bits of experiences. But yeah, the other thing that I wanted to discuss, if I can remember what it was, this is where I need to refer to this, because there was a pretty big thing, I think. So I'm just going to quickly do a quick checklist type thing. So history was fine. Like I say, they didn't do a lot of tying in with the ghosts. They just said a bunch of famous names, which understandable. They have a short window to do history, but yeah. I'd have preferred it if they'd have been like the First Lady Ribblesdale, whatever. I can't say that word very well. If they'd have said, like I say, it tends to be cliche with tragedy or whatever. So it's like, oh, after her husband died, she then lived alone in the house as a grieving widow and then passed away. Then I'm like, okay, she could very well be haunting the place. But they don't. They say about the husband who died on the famous ship, the Titanic, but they don't really say much about her, when it, in theory, would be her haunting the hall, as she, after that, became the First Lady Ribblesdale. So that implies she lived there and has good connection there. But then everyone else, like Winston Churchill, stayed there one time. I'm like, why are you saying about Winston Churchill? Winston Churchill. Why are you saying about him? He stayed there like once. It's like Oliver Cromwell. Oliver Cromwell stayed there once with his troops. Alright, that doesn't mean he's going to be there. I could have stayed there one night. Doesn't mean I'm going to be there. So, especially as we then discuss it later on, it was odd. That's what I thought of the history. It was a bit odd and a bit irrelevant, but I get it. I've not looked into the history myself, so for all I know, there might not be a lot that happens that is worth talking about. But yeah, for all I know, I've not seen the actual investigation parts. The next 4 parts are all investigation. They may very well think that they're communicating with Winston Churchill. That might be why they've said it. I don't know. So we'll see. And I will mention as well, if they suddenly are like, oh my god, it's Oliver Cromwell, I will mention it and be like, now I get it. Now I get why they've mentioned this history, so it doesn't kind of come out of nowhere. So that's that. I think Carl did brilliantly around the cottage. Absolutely brilliant. He was by himself with the one camera. Only criticisms here, he should have been a bit more decisive and he should have zoomed out immediately. Because otherwise it opens the skeptical argument of him just kind of, when he's being indecisive, it'll let someone move to a different area to then make noises occur somewhere else. That's what a skeptical argument would be. However, I don't think that was the case. And like I said, the only thing I can think of here is audio overlays with the crunching, but if he is walking through, if that's genuine, and there's crunching that loud, you can pretty much guarantee no one is going up and down those stairs without you hearing it. Which is why I'm like, you know what, I think he did very well, and I think that probably was paranormal, I think. But, because then he doesn't search that room, I'm like, yeah. And he doesn't look outside either. It's strange, the start of that segment, I can't remember what the comment was, but he seems to make an off comment about how no one could have left, implying that was the one door that was to enter and leave. But then he shows there is a back door with an alley. So someone could have opened the door, closed the door, whatever, gone around the house, gone around the back. Yeah, this is why I put a lot of emphasis on they need to try and pinpoint where everyone is. Just keeping an eye on the time. to see how long I've been going for. About half an hour, I think, so far. So that's what I think to that. Aside from that, he was brilliant. Which again, as much as I critique Carl, it's very, very good to see him showing us around a location when he hears noises, and going, look, there is no one in this room upstairs, there is no one over here, there's no one over there. That's very good of him. And it's something I praised him for a lot in my previous review. So, yeah, that's, yeah. I hope he keeps doing that. I'm sure he will. It should be standard investigation, really, to do that. Then you've got Carl, Yvette, Glenn, and Greg in the witch's cottage. This is where my main criticism comes in. It all seems very unprepared, very unexpected. They're a paranormal investigation team investigating somewhere they believe is haunted, and they believe is actively haunted. They've been there before. They know what it's like. For them to seem as unprepared as they were, like Carl seemed to have no knowledge about flies having connotations of death. Glenn just goes upstairs without taking a camera with him. Granted, he's the skeptic, he isn't a camera guy, but you would think Carl would have been like, oh no, wait, take this camera. Or no, I'll go up because I've got a camera. There's no showing upstairs to show that there's no one there. It all felt a lot like they'd intended to not publish that footage. That's what I think that feels like. Because they don't... You had a comment from Carl saying about how he's already been up there, so he knows no one's there, and you don't have them taking a camera, but we don't know that. When the knocking is occurring, they're saying about how it's 1 knock for no, 2 knocks for yes, but they're interpreting as that. They've not said to the spirits at the time, oh, just so you know, like, we'll do one knock is no, 2 knocks yes. They don't do that. So for them to then include that footage, then seems like there's something missing, right? It means that there's something missing from that, which is odd, and it makes them seem very unprepared. It makes it seem kind of like, not bloopers, but like behind the scenes footage. And I think that's what it should have been, and that's possibly what the team were running on about. Maybe during the moment, before the camera switched on, they had a discussion of, oh, should we switch on the cameras? This is all very unexpected. Maybe they had the discussion, and then they decided, we'll switch on the cameras, we'll decide later if we publish the content or if we include it in the episode. But again, this is where transparency needs to happen. They needed to have had narration from Yvette during this part when they're there in the witch's cottage saying, we weren't intending on publishing this, that's why this is the case. This is why this is all happening. We weren't intending on publishing it. Or they should have just done it as a separate video. They should have done it as a separate bit saying, this is what we encountered unexpectedly. So this is all the footage we've got. We didn't go upstairs because we didn't intend on showing you this, so we didn't show you that there was no one upstairs. And then that would have made it a little bit better. But otherwise it makes them seem, a bit inexperienced, which they're not. They've been doing it since the early 2000s, and yeah, it's... but then moving on from that bit, because that's pretty much all that happens. Very, very interesting that Greg said he could hear them from outside. That was very, very interesting. Because you don't often see people comment on that, saying, oh, we can hear the knocking from outside. You don't even have them consider the fact of, oh, can you hear it from outside, when it's very loud. So that was interesting. Although, again, if I was you, Carl, I would have called him inside with his camera to then, because he had a camera outside who see it, and to be like, oh, would you mind just quickly filming upstairs to show that there's no one up there doing this knocking? Because then Stuart's unaccounted for as well. So I'm just like, which is where, when Carl gets that phone call saying, oh, it's Stuart, he should have answered. They should have put it on speakerphone. They should have filmed it and overlaid the footage to then be like, oh, look, Stuart's in a completely different place. It couldn't have been him. So, and then you have Stuart in the psychiatric ward where I'm like, again, he's pretty good. The noise occurs off camera, he's off camera, but he's getting general view shots. The shot it opens on absolutely is a general view shot. That is what you would typically see. That's very similar to the one I'd actually included in the post of the shot of Pendle Hill through the window. So that's fine. His replication of the noise is fine. How he goes about it is great, really. It's just being still, listening out, hearing doors slam, hearing the footsteps, and him being like, I'm not showing it because I want you to hear it. Because when you pick up a camera, you can hear a lot of muffled noises and things. So I think that was good. And he did, again, like with Carl, he did what he could with the one camera he had. So, yeah, that was good. Then that moves on to the walk around, which, again, it's Glenn and Yvette having a look around the location. Absolutely fine. Yeah, I don't really have much more to say off the top of my head. Like I say, like if you want to know more in-depth thoughts or anything like that, it is all written up in a review on the blog. This is just a fairly brief summary, a good 45 minutes to an hour of conversation. I think maybe that. I don't know how long I've been going for. Then you have the snooker ball incident, which I've already discussed a fair bit, where iffy about about Carl keeping his camera on between takes. Bit iffy as well, like Yvette doesn't think before going into the room where the snooker ball is. She really should have gone, oi, Carl, film in that room a moment, I'm going to go in there. And he's like, okay. And then he could go in, he could switch on the lights, and then that would have made it so much better. For Yvette to have spotted it in a really dark room, and then go in, pick it up, and it's all off camera. You do not see that snooker ball on the floor before she's got it in her hand. You don't see it, and you should see it. Like I say in the written up review, you could then make an argument if they had shown it, that it was planted there, or it was already there before in some way, or that, like Glenn says, maybe it was a breeze that just knocked it off, but at least that takes it off of any particular team member. Because Yvette's there in a big puffy coat, which is fine, it's cold probably. Big pockets. She could very well have gone in dark room, dark coat, hand in pocket, gone, oh look, snooker ball. It could have been, and this is why she should have stopped and said, look, film inside that room. I'm about to pick up this. I don't know if me picking it up is going to be on the shot. Film that first. Again, it is what should be standard practice in the paranormal. Like with the key, even when she finds the key, she should be like, oi, cameraman, come over here, look at that on the floor, zoom in on that, before then picking it up and go, oh look, I found a key. Because again, you know, you never know as a viewer. With them being there, it's fine, they're there. As Glenn says, they are there, they know what they're experiencing. And they know how legitimate it is. It's like I've said in my reviews, only Stuart will know if he dropped things on the table off camera to make that noise. Only Carl will know if he genuinely had a pain in his back. But us at home, we watch it, and it can come across a certain way. And that moment where Yvette finds the snooker ball does come across a certain way, where you can easily say she was just doing what many, many magicians do, where they just have it in their pocket. And it's like, you know, but I don't want to believe that, which is why I acknowledge the other side of it as well. I've got to obviously say the skeptical side. You have to acknowledge both of it. But yeah, it's yeah. And then they move on to a different area from there. Brilliant speculation on it possibly being the land, because it's not often discussed, and I was surprised about Glenn bringing up the fact of it could be cursed. It feels like cursed land is either an American thing now, you know, the typical Indian burial ground phrase, or like an old-fashioned term. It's not something often brought in now. So it was an interesting conversation that they had, and it is a good point. That it very well, it could be the land. It could be something to do with the land. I don't know. And it kind of links with the building speculation as well about, the actual house being haunted. Like not spirits within the house, but the actual walls of the house itself being somewhat alive. That could tie in with the land. It could be the land that is somewhat alive, and perhaps that is causing things to happen on the surface of the land. I don't know. And then the car incident happens, so that's when he goes down with the back. Which again, they should have shown it. They should have shown that mark. You see it all the time on social media where people are posting pictures of scratch marks, and even other investigators, if during an investigation someone says, "Oh, I've just been scratched on the back," they show it. I don't know why they don't show it. And if they don't show it intentionally, they need narration, or they need something in the moment saying, he did have a scratch, he did have a red mark on his back, but we have chosen not to show it because Carl feels uncomfortable with his back on camera. I don't know. It could be that. It could be as simple as that as to a reason why they didn't show it. But you need to include it. You need the transparency. That's the only thing I can think of with that. I do think he probably trapped a nerve. Again, looking at it from trying to look at it on the fence, I think best case scenario here is that he trapped a nerve in his back. Because from what he describes, and from what Greg was doing, with him lying on his back and then lifting his bum off the floor and things, that's very much so what you do to try and kind of unlodge a nerve from your back and to try and sort things. So I think he probably just had a trapped nerve. And the fact he was then shortly after being like, you know what, I'm actually fine now. I think it was just a trapped nerve, because that's very much how trapped nerves can be, where they're suddenly, ow, agony, and then a moment later, you know what, I'm fine. So I think it was that. And I think he should have acknowledged the possibility of it being that, instead of defiantly being like, no, I know the difference. I think he should have acknowledged that it could have been, because that's the rational explanation. And then you had him seeing him face the door, and the discussion about, Yvette becoming increasingly worried about them all splitting off and things, which is fine. I prefer them to be in groups of 3. Yeah, groups of 3 is best for an investigation, because then you have 2 cameramen and 1 investigator. The cameramen would stand either side with the investigator in the middle. So you have the cameramen capturing each other on the camera along with the investigator. That way you can rule out all 3 members of the team. If it's just 2 people, you have 1 cameraman and 1 investigator, which means that the cameraman then isn't on camera. Or you have both acting as cameramen, which means that neither are probably going to be on camera, because they're going to be showing their surroundings and they're going to be very easily distracted. So if you have a 3-person layout kind of thing, then you can say to the cameraman, right, don't worry about investigating, just worry about capturing me and each other on camera. And then, ideally, like the investigator would be wearing like a GoPro or something like that, just so that then they capture what they see. Otherwise, you end up with the inevitable scenario of the investigator goes, "Oh my god, I've seen something." Both cameramen then immediately show the thing, and then no one is on camera. So that's ideally how you do it. So Yvette says she don't want anyone to go off on their own, which is fine. I have no issue with that. There is a belief that if you are by yourself in a haunted location, you are more likely to experience things. Any parapsychologist or skeptic will say that is because you are by yourself in an allegedly haunted location. And that is not because of the ghosts, that is because of the undoubtable paranoia, in a way, that you'd be feeling. You're there by yourself, you'll have heightened senses, your flight or fight will kind of kick in, regardless of how used you are to that. And so it's like pareidolia, but your brain is hardwired to see faces and everything. That will be happening because it's survival instincts. You can't switch off survival instincts. So if you're by yourself in a location, you will see shadows moving around. You will see shapes. You will hear noises because your brain will be heightened senses, heightened survival instincts. So I have no issue with them not going off by themselves. Because I think that explanation very well sums up why you're more likely to experience things by yourself, because it's not paranormal, it's just heightened senses. Which, again, believers would be going, oh yeah, heightened senses, it's heightened psychic senses. And you're like, maybe, but at the end of the day, humans are animals, they do have survival instincts. And so we'll hear more, and we'll see more, and, you know. But again, this is why I'm just like, you've got to look at it on the fence, because that's one of those where both sides are pretty balanced. So she argues that. Carl then says, oh, we should go off by ourselves, because then we're more likely to capture evidence, and which again is fine. Fine arguments from Carl. Good to see him arguing that they should be building on stuff, and that they should be trying to get more evidence towards paranormal. Granted, I think that they should have referenced their previous investigation if they wanted to build on things, because they captured some good audio. Again, themes of audio. Maybe it is audio overlays. Don't know, but it was very odd to me that they didn't reference that. Maybe future episodes they will reference it. Maybe they'll be like, oh, are you the child we met last time? Brilliant, solves all my issues. But yeah. So that's that discussion, which is fine. I've already discussed Carl seeing a face at the door. Did he? Didn't he? I don't know. He doesn't capture it on camera. You've got two ways you can go about that. Either take his word for it, or don't take his word for it. That's as simple as it gets with that. As I say, this is the third incident involving Carl, so if I was the Most Haunted team, I would definitely be asking the question of, why does stuff always happen to you? Or why are you always seeing faces in windows, Carl? That's what I'd be doing. Especially if I was Glenn. If I was Glenn, I would be doing that. As acting skeptic, I would do that, because it is a pattern at this point. And it's a pattern I will highlight further if in the next 4 episodes more stuff happens to Carl, because I'm expecting it. I'm, and you could argue, oh, you're already in the mindset, but I'm just like, but it happens. It does happen. This is why my summary of activity in the blog post, I say Carl experiences this, Carl experiences that, because I want to keep track of it. The key incident, again, chaotic camera work was a big thing here at the start when they were trying to find the key. But again, it shows that it was unexpected. So I get what they're going for, but in an investigation, you need to try and keep everything as clear as possible. And, you know, it's basically control, isn't it? Like trying to keep everything as clear and still as possible. The recreation was brilliant when Carl got everyone to stand back where they were when they heard the key. Was brilliant. I do think that Stuart was further back than what was shown when he tried to throw the key. But it was good that they showed footage from every camera, and you do see in one of those camera footage bits, Stuart has both his hands on the camera. Granted, as I pointed out, his camera was at a low angle. He could have thrown with one hand, quickly grabbed, and then that's why it lifts again. And then by the time he turns round, he's, kind of, you know, but I don't know. This is why I like my closet, because you don't know. You don't know. Unless you are there, you do not know. And yeah, that was pretty much it. You then had the door slam. Again, big criticism. Carl and Stuart both had their cameras on, right? And pointed towards that. Why was their footage not shown? I don't know. I do not know why their footage wasn't shown. It was odd. Especially as they'd just shown footage from all the cameras for the key incident. It's like, you should do that all the time. If a door slams, you should show footage from every single camera to place where every single person is at the time of that slam. And they don't, which leaves questions, and they shouldn't be leaving questions. Hence why I've been so critical with this episode, because there are too many questions. Too many questions to be left. Yeah, and that's the episode then. They then end up hearing a noise, running back, hearing footsteps above them, and no one films anyone's feet. Granted, you don't see their bodies moving, you don't really see the upper half of their legs moving, but they can still tap their foot and enhance audio from that. So there was too much in this episode where you can look at it and poke holes. That was my issue. That's probably the big issue. They included footage they probably shouldn't have included with the general shots stuff, because it makes them look inexperienced and unprepared, which I don't like saying, but it does. And then they don't really help themselves out in the walk around with, I mean, granted, again, it's unexpected stuff, but so it's like with Carl keeping his camera on, I can forgive that. I can be like, you know what? You've just kind of fluked it a little bit. That it's just an unfortunate thing happening to you. But then you're picking up the ball and not thinking, oh, film that before I pick it up. So you can see, I mean, again, the camera might make the room look darker than it is, but you can see how dark that room is. Surely you'd think, I'm going to block the entirety of this shot if I go and pick up that ball. And she's been doing it for 20 years now. So, and that's my thoughts. Anyway, that's my thoughts of it. Just wanted to do a brief summary. Like, it's a lot of what I would deem as negatives. But it's a lot of stuff that they can improve on. They very easily improve on it. Because obviously I bring up audio overlays. There's nothing at all proving that. Nothing at all. I just said that's a possibility of, if it was faked, that is the only way I can think of how they'd fake it. But then, with the argument of audio overlays, you could get some very legitimate evidence and still argue audio overlays. So I don't like that explanation. Because then, this is why I like the word lists, because we're in an age where technology is so clever and so everywhere, so prevalent, that you can't do anything without someone being like, oh, that was faked. It's like, look at the moon landings, for instance. Moon landings happened in the 60s, right? And you have people saying, oh, it was all faked, it was all filmed on a stage. This is the thing with the paranormal now. This is the thing where if the paranormal did exist, how are you going to prove it? If the moon landings did happen, how are you going to prove it? Unless you take someone to the moon with you, you can't. Unless you show someone a ghost actually in front of them, you can't. No, at least not in the typical way. Which is why I like the word lists, because it's more data driven. It's more, this word was spoken at this time, look at the gaps between the times as a pattern. That kind of thing. Or look, I'm getting these words in this location, but not in this location, only ever there. It's a pattern. And that is paranormal evidence in itself. It's not a ghost appearing in front of you, but it is something weird happening. It's like if you roll the dice and every single time in like where I am now, if I was to roll the dice and every single time it would land on a 6, but then I'd go somewhere else and every single time it would land on a 4. That's the equivalent of the word lists. And you'd be like, that's a bit odd, that shouldn't behave like that. And then it then becomes empirical, because then you're like, here, guaranteed 6, there, guaranteed 4. Proof, roll the dice, there we go, to 6, proof, roll the dice, there we go to 4. That's what you need to do to prove the paranormal. That's what no one is doing. No one's doing that. No one's doing it at all. They're all showing you footage from investigations, and as a result, people can look at it and go, it's fake. And it's sad, because it's time and effort going into investigations for then someone to look at it and be like, oh, it's fake. You've messed with it in editing. I don't have technological know-how to do that, but it's what people would say. Which is why I feel bad criticising the most haunted team. Could very well be fake, could very well be true. I don't know. They know, I don't. And even then, maybe the team doesn't know. Maybe it's only one or two members of the team that know. Yeah. It's very much so like, I remember there was a Ghost of Britain live stream I was watching, and they had someone with them who was claiming to be a psychic. And I'd seen a few streams before then of just the Ghost of Britain team, and nothing had happened for a bit, and they were like, oh, this is real, investigating, nothing happens. And then they go on a stream with this psychic, and then suddenly the psychic is down on the ground and being like, oh, I've been attacked. I'm like, of course it's happened to the psychic. Psychic goes off camera, suddenly a noise happens from his direction. Of course that happens around the psychic. This is what I'm spotting with Carl. Does it mean everyone around Carl is faking things? No. Does it mean Carl is faking things? No. It means that there's a pattern, and they need to look into that pattern. So yeah, so I think that's it for my review, I think. I can't think of anything else. It was just a quick thing. I've probably been going for about an hour now. I don't know if this says how long I've been going for. No, I don't think it does. I will post this video to YouTube as well. All my intention is, after I do a written review, I will discuss it in a live format like this. I shouldn't be as rambly at the start of the next one. This one was particularly rambly because I was quite nervous, but then got more into it. And sorry about all the tangents as well. I go off on a lot of tangents. But yeah, so whenever I post a review, or yeah, I don't know. If it's a review of an episode, I'll do a live stream. If it's just someone's experience, I probably won't do a review of it because it seems a bit iffy doing a review of someone's experience. If it's a particularly interesting one, I might, but I'll always live stream a review of any reviews of any programs, even anything like that. So I hope that you've enjoyed the blog post that I did. I hope that you've enjoyed this live stream. Again, sorry it was very rambly at the start. It is the first live I've done in this way for the channel, where I've done a kind of, in a way, a blog post as a live stream. Yeah, so I hope that you've enjoyed, and I will see you when I next do a review, and I hope that you enjoy the posts. Goodbye.